Welcome and thank you for tuning in. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. It seems today with technology at our fingertips that there is almost anything that we can do to make ourselves known, heard, and even watched. Watched? Wait a minute, what are we talking about there? Well, since YouTube has pretty much dominated the internet for most people, their eyes are kind of floating there instead of going to cable television and even regular television. People are creating their own little shows, sometimes they're creating their own little movies, and most importantly, they're trying to find ways that they can create their own resources of revenue. Byte-sized television is the title of our book today, where you can create your own TV series for the internet. TV series, you say? Yes. Well, as a matter of fact, our guest today is going to be able to tell you how you could go about doing this with such shows as Step by Step, Happy Days, and the like. He's going to be able to tell you what you can do to launch your personal television series on the internet. I'd like to welcome to the Beyond 50 radio program today our guest, Mr. Ross Brown. Ross, thank you for joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program.
Thanks for having me on your show.
Now, you've got a lot of great, extensive background here when it comes to television. Tell our listeners about that.
I started out, I wanted to be a writer, and I learned that you could become a sitcom writer. And since I enjoyed watching them on television, I started writing spec scripts, eventually got good enough to get an agent, and I got my first staff writing job on The Cosby Show, which was a huge break. It was in the second year of the show, and it was the #1 show on television then. It was quite thrilling to work on it, and a great learning experience because the senior writers were so talented that I learned a great deal. And I went on to work on a bunch of other shows, some of which your listeners will have heard of, The Facts of Life, Who's the Boss, and then, as you said, Step by Step. I was the head writer and executive producer of that show for 5 years. So I had a long career in traditional television, and you may be wondering how I made my way to the Internet then.
I think we all find ourselves beginning to evolve almost by necessity, and you've certainly been able to do that.
Well, yeah, and part of it came out of my teaching, actually. I began teaching at film schools in Southern California where I live, and I teach at Chapman University now, and the dean of the film school there is a very forward-thinking guy, and when he hired me in 2006 in the fall there, he said, could you put together some sort of class about, he didn't even know what to call it at that time, making videos for iPods was sort of the vague terminology. YouTube at that time had been out for less than a year. People were starting to experiment with online series, so he saw that it was a growing trend, so I taught a class, and it worked very well, and the students made pilots for a series that was 5 minutes or less. And since that time, it's just exploded on the internet because it's not one of the 10 commandments that you can only make a TV show that's 30 or 60 minutes in length.
Mm-hmm. Now, tell us what the difference is between what we're talking about here with bite-sized television and the traditional way that we go about the television shows that you were actually involved with.
Well, in traditional broadcast or cable television, there's a whole corporate process there because it's a, multi-billion-dollar industry, and so the people who create the shows there are, by and large, people who have extensive amounts of experience because the networks aren't just buying an idea, they're buying someone's capability to deliver episodes of that idea over and over again, week in, week out, on budget, on schedule, all those things. But in the Internet, there really aren't any gatekeepers, and you can make, if you decide you want to make a TV show, you can make one. The equipment's inexpensive. You need to have a solid concept and write scripts. That part never changes about storytelling. But the distribution is free. There aren't gatekeepers for it. And the range is unlimited. You can do comedies, you can do dramas, you can do advertainment, reality shows, whatever type of show you want to do, and it doesn't have to be the exact same length every week.
Mm-hmm. Now, I think what's really exciting about this book, it's really a good how-to book that really gets people to understand. You can't just go out there and pump something out, for instance, if you really want to bring eyes to what it is that to what it is that you're creating. Now, that's really important. I mean, content. If you don't have that going on, you might be able to hit one out of the park, by accident, but for the most part, what you want is people to consistently be coming back to your channel.
Well, absolutely, and you're right. The quality of the content is really important. I mean, if you think about your own internet, the web surfing experience there, you make decisions very quickly about whether you're going to continue watching something or not. And, I would say probably in under 10 seconds. Do I like this? Do I not like this? So you really have to be high quality, from the start, not waste any time at all, and be entertaining or engaging to your audience. And I think that involves writing. I'm a writer by trade, and that's my prejudice there, but you can't just point a camera at things. You have to have a plan and a script.
I think sometimes when you take a look at some of the things that people produce, you're going, okay, what were they, what do they have in mind here? But you realize, had they tightened things up just a bit, as you were talking about the writing, so some sort of, looking onto the horizon to say, what really was your end goal here? You would have had something much, much better.
Well, absolutely, and I think that this is true of all writing, movies, television plays, short-form internet series. You have to have a central concept and an idea of what's the story you're telling. I don't mean that you have to have a moral message necessarily, but you have to say, if you can't say in a few sentences what the core story is that you're telling, then it's going to be very hard to engage an audience and get them to stick with your internet television series, because they're not going to stick around for 15 minutes to find out what you're trying to say.
Now, the reason I brought up Step by Step earlier in the introduction is because there was one particular actress, Christine Lakin, and she produced her particular internet TV series. Tell us a little bit about that, because this was quite interesting how she took what she was already doing in her career and said, I'm going to kind of just push it to the edge here. But it was really a pretty good idea.
It's a very good idea, and I've seen several episodes of it, and it's a terrific show. And part of the reason it hasn't been out on the internet now is she's gotten interest from cable TV networks in making it a full-length series, so she's kind of caught in between. But Chris Lakin played the tomboy character on Step by Step. She's now around 30 years old and is very far from a tomboy. She's a very attractive, glamorous, and very talented young lady. She acts, she's a choreographer, she writes, and now she's a producer as well. So what she decided to do to make a web series was created a series called Lovin' Lakin, which is about a former childhood actress, as Chris says, a dumber version of myself, my real self, who is trying to make it as an adult actress. And it was very clever. She tapped into her personal connections. She used to be roommates with the actress Kristen Bell, so she did an episode where she hangs out, essentially jogs in place in front of her house so she can run into her and try and engage a friendship. And Kristen Bell, at least, is pretending she has no idea who Christine is and wants to get rid of her badly. There's another episode where Christine's teaching a children's acting class, so with 10-year-olds, but they're doing like the post-rape scene from Streetcar Named Desire.
Oh, no.
And, she's saying, well, I have to believe you were raped there to a 10-year-old. And she has Jamie Lee Curtis does an episode there. Patrick Duffy from Step by Step does an episode there. It's a very, very funny show, and Chris is really creative and has found a way to use the form. She's to talk about a humorous version of herself.
Mm-hmm. Now tell us about some of the things that you've actually seen out there when it comes to bite-sized television that were really surprising, when you could say, this is a person who's an amateur here, but somehow, there's a lot of talent that's going on out there.
Well, there are all kinds of things that are really talented. This isn't a series, but it was a very talented effort there. There was a musician whose guitar was damaged. He was, a not known musician, was flying to Nebraska to play a small club. The airline, which was United Airlines, damaged his guitar and wouldn't pay for it. So he wrote a song called United Breaks Guitars and made a music video of it there that was totally low budget, just had people holding up signs and throwing guitars carelessly on an airport tarmac and so on. And it got 6 million hits in about 2 weeks, and he got his guitar paid for very quickly. But also, not just the guitar there, the video and the talent behind it and the talent in the music there, I'm sure drove traffic to his website and got him new fans of his music there. Mm-hmm. So, very talented guy there. There's a series I personally like. It is slightly blasphemous, but it makes me laugh, called Mr. Deity. That's about a guy who is allegedly the deity, but he wears Hawaiian shirts and khaki pants and has middle management assistants who bring him lists of things they're supposed to be working on that day. And it's a very funny take on that. My students have made interesting web series. I had one of my students had a very good idea. I don't think it was executed as well as it could have been, but the idea I think is worth mentioning to your listeners here, who's called Model Family, and it was about a 15-year-old who felt he didn't fit in with the rest of his family because they were all television models. His mother was like a Victoria's Secret model, and his father was the brawny paper towel guy, and his brother was a shirtless Abercrombie jeans model, and they were in character the whole time in the house. His mother walked around in lingerie. So it was a very funny take on a traditional sitcom idea, a teen who feels out of place in his family, but that fit the web paradigm perfectly, I felt.
Now, talk about you mentioned earlier, Ross, when it came to, working for network television, of course there was a lot of gatekeepers that were involved in there. There's a lot of money that's involved. So you tend to have a lot of shackles and restrictions. Now, with Internet TV, that kind of changes the game a lot. And you can actually see that because, for instance, you can actually post YouTube videos virtually for free. I mean, as you were talking about, distribution there is something that's real key. So a lot of times people think they can just kind of throw it out there and why isn't anybody listening? But the fact is you really got to spend time thinking about what your product is, if that's what you want to call it, thinking about what your creative content is, and really putting all these things together. Tell our listeners how important that really is.
Well, my sort of catchphrase for this now is in film schools we used to create film auteurs, and now you have to be a film entrepreneur. You have to market your product. There's so much content on the internet that the field of dreams, if you build it, they will come, just doesn't apply to the internet. You've got to let them know it's there and use all of the marketing tools at your disposal, social media, your personal web list, and you can't be afraid to ask your email list, your Facebook friends, all of that stuff to repost to their friends because that's how the internet works. You multiply by there used to be a shampoo commercial. She told two friends, then she told two friends, then she told two friends, and it multiplies to 64 images of the person with the shampoo. That's what you have to do on the internet to let people know that your product is there, and then if it's good, they'll help spread the word.
Ross, it's really interesting because people who may be listening to the program, I mean, by virtue, this is an internet radio program. We actually came off of terrestrial radio. And so, this is certainly a service people can come on to and they can create their own shows for free. And believe me, you really listen to some of the things up there and you go, well, okay, you really need more discipline about what you're doing here because we had to treat it as a business. There was, by virtue, you had to get advertisers and sponsors on terrestrial radio. And it certainly relaxes you a little bit realizing that you're not under the gun to be able to buy those hours of radio time to do the show, but originally we treated it as a business, which required us by virtue to have the discipline to be able to put something out there that was worth people wanting to put money into in the first place. This here that we're talking about with bite-sized television really isn't that much different if you really want to be successful.
Well, the key word that you said there, which I totally agree with, is discipline. You have to be disciplined about your creative work. You have to be disciplined about your marketing and spreading the word. I mean, if you're a writer or a content creator, you have to commit a certain portion of your day, say 1 to 2 hours, to marketing yourself, marketing your product. You can't just, be a creator and say, well, I don't do that business stuff because you'll be an unknown creator then when nobody will see your work. And I find it true creatively, too, that discipline is what's required. I teach lots and lots of students. They're very creative. What they don't lack creativity. What they lack is craft and discipline, and that's the learning curve for most people. Is the number of drafts that people do of scripts is mind-bending for those who are uninitiated there. I just spoke with a friend on a traditional television show, and these are professionals that have all been writing television for over 20 years. They do 9 drafts of the outline before they write the script on this TV show, and that's not because they're just nitpickers. It's because that's the work that's required to craft a professional quality story. And so I think you really have to take the time to do multiple drafts of your script and polish it, and then we haven't even gotten to the really tedious part of filmmaking, which is post-production.
Well, yeah, exactly. One of the things that my partner has done is when we started creating YouTube videos actually about 2.5 years ago, there's some of the equipment that's involved. When you were talking about post-production, she started using Sony Vegas Pro,
right.
which was really nice. Now, this is a piece of software that you could buy for, about $100. But when, people say, well, why would I want to bother with that when I can use Movie Maker? It's like, well, believe me, there's a tremendous difference between those two things, One is extremely linear, where one really starts to pull out the bells and whistles, and the different tracks, audio and video as well. And if you're going to really put something together that's really worth watching, you're going to want to jump up to the level of actually spending money. Talk about some of the things that people can get started with that are extremely essential when it comes to putting together a bite-sized television show.
Well, I think I think there are plenty of inexpensive cameras available, and so I don't think that's a big jump for anybody. For a couple $100, the cameras are quite high quality and perfectly good for most projects that are there. The thing that I think is worth investing in, renting, you don't have to buy, is an external microphone, because the microphone that's mounted on the camera is going to, I always liken the sound that you get from it from the early videos of my era, where your uncle or your father would come in and they would just be talking behind the camera and saying, here we are, we're going into Daniel's room, say something to the camera, Daniel. And if your project is supposed to sound like a home movie, like if it was about a diary of my parents or something like that, then that's perfect sound for it. But if you want it to look like omniscient narrator, polished television, that hollow sound is the first giveaway that it's amateur. And so an external mic and a boom is a good idea, and you can rent them, for $40 or something like that.
It's kind of funny, Russ, when you bring up the home movie. What is it with people who actually get these, they get the video camera in hand, and they feel the need to pan in and out? That one there always cracked me up. It's like, what are you doing?
I know. They all are very strange, kind of. They're somewhere between the scene in The Graduate where he's in the diving suit and you're inside of the mask there, and sort of a horror movie where you're the monster and you just hear the breathing from the monster's point of view as it comes toward the teenagers making out.
Right. Now, it's interesting in bite-sized television, people say, really, this isn't as big as you're making it sound to be, but I actually took some time to where I started taking public transportation to downtown, and it is astounding that more and more people are actually beginning, with their cell phones, their BlackBerries, their iPods, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
It is astounding how people are absorbing information through that medium. Tell us about this. This is just incredible.
Well, part of it is a generational shift over there that certainly my students, they don't distinguish between, well, I'm going to watch network television, or I'm going to watch cable television, or I'm going to watch internet videos. It's all video content to them, and it's not restricted to younger people too. They're obviously, you're doing Beyond 50 radio. People over 50 have lots of money, so they have iPads, they have cell phones that have internet capability, and it's just become part of our daily access. It's almost like an itch now. Everybody knows they can access this kind of visual entertainment, so they do, and they can fill all kinds of times. Oh, I'm standing in line at the supermarket, I think I'll watch an internet video here, or whatever you're doing. And I think the next level of this, which is coming very quickly, is as your flat panel TV in your home merges with the internet, and that's available now, but it's not widely used by the public, but it will be in a few years, then people will distinguish even less between internet video and CBS, and they'll be able to switch back and forth between them, and it'll drive higher quality content and more consumption of the content, and all of that. So I don't think this is going to be a fad that fades. I think it's going to be a trend that grows.
I completely couldn't agree with you more. It's really quite amazing that it has been able to get to that level, and that we actually have these kind of tools and resources. It's almost like, because by virtue of the internet even being available, that a playing field has been created to where talent can really sprout without a lot of restrictions. However, there are still rules that we need to play by. Tell us about some of those.
Well, the basic rule is a good story well told. You have to the audience wants to feel that they are in the hands of a skilled storyteller. They need you to do that well. If your experience on any media, if the story's not being told well, people change the channel, find something else to do, and in the internet, that decision is lightning fast. If they, in 15 seconds, if they say this isn't very good, they're gone. And
right.
So, you have to use every second of your storytelling. I say in the book there that I think your first images and your main title should be entertaining for people there, because that's your first opportunity. It's one of those business sayings, you only get one chance to make a first impression. And I think that's true with video too. You want to grab people quickly and with something that's engaging or interesting, and then have it be of a professional quality there. I mean, we don't need more. Here's my theory: is the last thing we need is more web series about 20-something slackers, and the next last thing we need is teenagers lip syncing in their bedroom. But there's plenty of talent out there to tell good stories of all kinds. And the thing that I think is really wonderful about the internet is that on traditional television, you have to conform to their brand. On the internet, you decide what's interesting to you, and you find like-minded people. And I think that's a great creative freedom, and especially for the Beyond 50 audience, which has been so ignored by traditional television because the advertisers crave younger eyeballs and all of that stuff. Changing a little bit now, but still, I think it's great for your audience to be able to tell stories that will be interesting to them, not interesting to 14-year-old boys.
Well, I certainly couldn't agree with you more, Ross. I remember when we started our program a little over 7 years ago, nobody on the planet was doing anything like it. It was really quite amazing. It was just an idea that the two of us, we came together and said, why don't we just do this? Now, originally, the whole idea was to do something. She said, why don't we do a show for seniors? And I said, well, that's a little bit too far, on the spectrum, being that I'm approaching only my late 30s at the time. And so I said, but why don't we do this? And it wasn't because we were really looking at the boomer or the people in midlife. It just made sense because here was a growing generation of people that would be consistent. Pretty soon after the boomers, you've got Generation X. Everybody eventually, for the most part, is going to be turning 50. And I said, there are a lot of great stories in there because this is a point here where people are actually approaching midlife. They're kind of looking back and saying, I've spent most of my life trying to please other people. I want to go out there and I want to find out things for myself. And I thought, there is just a lot of inspiring stuff here. And as you were saying, to be able to create TV series, like you said, because this is a particular age group that had been ignored, that this here could be very inspirational for the younger generation going, well, I thought a 50-year-old was a senior citizen, when in fact, no, it's a very active group of people. So you go on the internet, and from time to time you'll see these particular kind of things, occurring, but I think that if you actually get out there and you produce something that says, here's some of the snags that I've ran into, or here's some of the successes, or here's some of the dreams that I'm finally seeing realized, there is a lot of really great stories out there you can come up with.
Well, I absolutely agree, and I think, the people who are, reaching midlife aren't saying, okay, so how do I just go fishing or pack it up for the rest of my life. There's a tremendous amount of creative energy and people looking for new ways to express themselves. And to open up the concept of television series, it doesn't necessarily have to be a comedy or a drama. Let's say you've reached midlife and you always wanted to go scuba diving. That now you can make a series about your scuba diving trips and document that and share it with people who are interested in that. Or I'm an acoustic guitar player, and so I go to a website called the Acoustic Guitar Forum. There's just a gazillion people out there who are sharing incredible passion and information and creativity and enthusiasm about whatever your particular interest is. And I think internet video is a great way, a new tool for sharing all these things.
Mm-hmm. Now, in your book, Bite-Sized Television, this is a way that a person, if they're really serious about creating some really, really good stuff here, I mean, you've got a lot of great stories, a lot of great references here, But one thing that certainly stands out is it's going to take work. You can't just do a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and expect yourself to have an excellent hoagie as the Bill Cosby would enjoy.
Yeah. No, it does take work. It takes work at the script level. It takes work at the pre-production level. One of the fastest ways to torpedo your project is to just decide to cast your friends in it as the actors. Despite what we may believe, actors really have a specific talent that we need, and so I encourage people, if you're going to have a scripted series, to tap into the people. Obviously, you don't have necessarily a casting agency in Hollywood to do that, but there's local theater wherever you live, and those people have skills that can and would love to be in videos. I think they're looking for ways to express their creativity, and so that's another level of discipline. And like we were talking about earlier, the post-production phase really requires care and patience there to get the edit just right, to get the sound quality right, to find the right music for your piece, and all those things, and deliver something that's professional. You want it as an audience, so as a creator, you should deliver that for other audiences.
Mm-hmm. Now, what I really found compelling for our listeners out there at Bite-sized Television is that you have these really unique interviews, and one of them I brought up earlier was Christine Lakin.
Mm-hmm.
These are people that you really Q&A to talk about, what their sort of, I guess, vision, what their experience was, and really a suggestion, almost kind of a hand-holding, if you will, for people to really get up and running and to feel confident that, okay, you're going to spend some time, you're going to put some sweat equity into this here, but if you do the right thing, and again, it's all about the end user. You may think something is fantastic, but it could be junk.
Mm-hmm.
But really the bottom line is you want these people to really become, addicted to your show, just like, fans of, say, Seinfeld.
Sure. No, absolutely. I think the interviews in the book, I was very fortunate, got to talk to some very, very well-known Hollywood people and some people who were just starting out, and to really hear the efforts they put into their shows. Also, one other thing I just want to say about the book, because I think the thing about, I realize that you have, it's Beyond 50 Radio and so on, but people who are making videos are getting younger and younger, and so, even though I wrote it with the general public in mind and colleges in mind, I think high schools and junior high schools, and maybe your audience has children or even grandchildren who are aspiring filmmakers, and I think helping them understand the craft that's involved in making something professional rather than something amateurish can be a great thing to share with younger friends and a younger audience too.
Well, exactly. Just as you mentioned, as we were talking about Christine Lakin earlier in the program, is here she started out with this particular webisode that she was creating, and all of a sudden now you got a cable television station interested in longer episodes. These are things that are possible. It's just amazing that if you really put the time in. Now, it isn't like somebody that's sitting there having coffee at some Hollywood cafe and you're just discovered. You really got to get out there and wave the flag and say, hey, take a look at this and tell me what you think.
But the internet can do that. I give an example in the book that there's a improvisational comedy group in Los Angeles called the Groundlings. They've been around for 30-plus years. They've launched lots of Lisa Kudrow and Phil Hartman, other people on Saturday Night Live, and very well-respected comedy group. They have a 99-seat theater. They decided to take one of their sketches out in the alley and make a video and put it on the internet. They got so many, like 18 million hits. I think I did the math on this. It would take them 6,000 years to fill the theater and get that many viewers for the sketch, and they got that many in a few weeks. So the internet can really promote those things. You mentioned Chris Lakin there. Chris also has a theater project that I think is wonderful called Worst Audition Ever, that she went around to actors and directors and said, come on stage, tell your story about the worst audition ever. And as you were talking about Chris, I realized, I should write Chris a note and say, that's an internet series. You put that on the web, I think people would really enjoy that.
Well, it's almost a how-to, if you will.
Right. And I don't know if Chris used it or not. I gave her one of my stories. I started at the bottom in the film business, and I say that quite literally, since one of my first jobs was standing in for a dog on a dog food commercial. on my hands and knees in front of a bowl of dog food because I was cheaper to hire than a second dog, and they didn't want to tire out the star dog. And I think there was some hazing going on from the crew. But I think all these people have great anecdotes about their lives, about their business, and I think the internet is a great way to share these things. That's a different form than a crafted, scripted series. But again, I think even something like that, interviews or memoirs, requires professionalism and care. What's the setting you're going to use? How are you going to light that? What's the sound going to sound like? What are the transitions between the interviews? All these things that as a viewer you take for granted, but when you're a creator, you have to really think about these things.
It's amazing, too, how difficult it seems when you see a really good end product. And you go, God, that's a piece. I could do that. It could be. There was one I remember that I was being shown. It was about marshmallows about to be roasted. And I was like, that is amazing. And you knew some work went into this, and I'm sure that it had millions of hits. But it was about these marshmallows that were in a bag, and they were kind of animated. And
right.
Oh no, we're about to. And I was just like, oh my goodness, this is really good stuff. But it's so crazy how silly some of the stuff is, but how good it really is out there. There is a lot of talent out there.
Well, there is, and you mentioned the marshmallows there. It reminds me of one of the early Pixar, the animation company's films about the lamp, the desk lamp that had a personality, and it's amazing. You can tell a story about a desk lamp or a bag of marshmallows. Absolutely, if when you invest human qualities like the marshmallows have fear and so on, then we as human beings can relate to the story. It's funny because they're marshmallows and they're afraid and all of that. And then when it's really well done, you feel well taken care of as an audience. And so I think that your goal when you're a creator is to make something that's as good a version of what you want to do as you can possibly do.
Mm-hmm. Now, Ross, what is something when the internet came out that really had you say, there is a field here that's in a way that's untapped, yet you need to bring over the traditional disciplines to make it successful, to make it work? What was that like for you to discover that?
Well, it was both exhilarating because of the possibilities and daunting because of the challenge there. People in not the film industry, but the publishing industry, when the internet came out, all thought that this would be the end of publishers, everybody would just self-publish their novel, but you still had the same challenges. One, you had to write a good novel, not an easy thing to do. And two, you had to make people aware of it. And it's the same challenges exist for video. You have to make a good product, and then you have to work really hard at making people aware of it. I'm still, to be honest, learning from some of my peers and more experienced colleagues about how to market myself, how to market this book, how to market bite-sized television as a book, and how to help my students market their films and so on. There's so much content on the internet that you have to find a way to distinguish yourself and to use the tools of the internet to create buzz about your product.
And just to let you know, listeners, this is coming from a guy that was involved with The Cosby Show, #1 rated television show several years in a row, Step by Step and the like. So even somebody like you is finding, wow, this is a vast scene that I really got to get out there and be heard and seen and experienced.
Well, and you mentioned The Cosby Show. I'll tell you an anecdote about that from all that time ago, just to show that nobody knows what the future is going to be. I was offered the job 2 weeks before Cosby premiered, and because of personal reasons, I'd been out of town previously, and we had a young child, and I just couldn't leave my wife. I meant going to New York, so I turned the job down, and my wife's uncle, who was a CBS executive at the time, said, you know what, you're better off because the show's in a terrible time slot. It's against Magnum PI. It's probably not going to last more than 13 weeks. Well, that turned out to be wrong. The Cosby Show lasted quite a bit more. So people don't really know the future. I'm notoriously bad at predicting the future. One of my early jobs, again, was making a commercial for IBM for this new machine they had. They were experimenting with it in Seattle that would be at a bank and at the ferry terminal where you could put a credit card-like device in and get money out of your bank account. That we know these as ATMs now.
Right.
And I remember thinking at the time, who the heck's going to use this thing? You're just going to trust it to give you the right amount of money? Well, I was wrong. I admit it when I'm wrong. I was wrong about that. It's, and so with something like the internet, we're still discovering, as much as it's part of our everyday life. We talk about YouTube now. We can't conceive of a world without YouTube now, and it's only been around for 5 years. And yet it's so much a part of our life, like an automobile, that we just accept it as a utility that's out there. But things are going to exist 5 years from now that we have not even imagined that will, I fully believe, further this whole world of internet video.
Well, I know I was told, and I don't know how true this is, that YouTube itself is like the second largest, for lack of a better word, search engine there is on the internet behind Google.
I wouldn't doubt that at all. I mean, if I use it all the time for, as I mentioned, I'm a guitar player. I will just go on there and say, write an artist name in, or blues, or fingerstyle guitar or something, and there's just endless material that's out there. It's all available as searchable and incredible learning resource for people.
Oh, very good. Now, Ross, if you could, give our listeners a website people can find out more about what it is that you do, how they can find the book and the like.
The book, for sure, you can find in all the usual places there. Amazon, it's available both in Barnes & Noble and your local bookstores. I'm a big believer in bookstores. It's available both in hard copy and electronic version. To find out more about what I do, I have a website which is Bytesized, BYTESIZED.TV.
Very good. Ross Brown, thank you so much for joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program today. Hopefully we've inspired a whole crop of people to realize that if you put a little bit of work out there, it's amazing what you might see as the end result. Thank you for joining us here on the program.
Thanks, Daniel.
You bet. Again, the book is Bite-Sized Television, Create Your Own TV Series for the Internet. Our guest today, Mr. Ross Brown. I'm Daniel Davis. Thank you for joining us. This is the Beyond 50 radio program. Be sure to visit us at our website at beyond50radio.com. That is the number 50. Sign up for our free weekly e-newsletter, and be sure to visit our blog as well. I'm Daniel Davis. Thank you for tuning in. This is the Beyond 50 radio program, and remember, live your day past halfway.